The hashtag detonated at 7:03 p.m., and the phones in Monroe Bakery became sirens. Alex said, "What did I do?" The first post was a 1-star review with a photo that wasn't his pastry. Jenna said, "People listen when you speak with heat." Priya whispered. Alex breathed. The orders froze as the counter lights hummed like an autopsy room. Alex said, "It's not even our plate." The crowd online swelled like seawater under a black moon. Mark said, "Shut down comments and write it out." A stranger posted an address, then another added a threat wrapped as a joke. Alex said, "They're laughing like I'm a punchline." In the back, the proofing dough sagged as if it heard the verdict. Priya said, "Tell the truth fast and with a heart." Jenna tweeted a clip that cut his words to knives. Alex said, "My name tastes like ash." The till drawer clanged, and in that metal ring, the world decided. Outside, rain started, thin and cold and precise. Alex said, "I can feel the floor giving way." The sign flickered, and the first headline crawled across his screen like a bruise. Sirens of laughter rose from timelines that never met him, and Alex said, "They hate a man they invented." Priya said, "We need a statement that bleeds honesty." The bakery smelled like sugar and fire alarms. Alex said, "If I explain, they'll call it spin." Mark said, "Silence is safer than sincerity." The rain tapped Morse on the glass, spelling nothing. Alex said, "One bad photo became a guillotine." Priya said, "Then show your hands, show the work." He stared at his palms, cracked by heat and hope. A new meme arrived, slicing his face into cruel geometry. Alex said, "My name trends beneath a cartoon knife." Somewhere a delivery van passed like a shrug. Priya said, "I'm here even if I drown with you." The mixer whined to a stop, and the room felt post-accident. Alex said, "They want blood more than truth." The city dimmed one notch, and the counters reflected his fear like chrome moons. The review's photo was a lie, but the lie had better lighting. Alex said, "It's not our plate, not our glaze." Screenshots multiplied like spores. Priya said, "Show the real pastry and the receipt trail." Mark said receipts bore people hungry for spectacle. A laugh track of strangers rolled under every correction. Alex said, "Do I apologize for a thing I didn't do?" Priya said, "Apologize for their hurt, not for the fiction." He drafted words that tasted like cardboard and swallowed them. The comments kept sharpening like glass in a tumbler. Alex said every second, "Another cut." Somewhere, thunder offered weak applause. Priya said, "We anchor to truth and keep rowing." The printer jammed and spit a ribbon of useless orders. Alex said, "If I admit nothing, they call it arrogance." The oven pinged, bright and oblivious to the burning world. A DM arrived from Jenna with a smiling knife. Jenna said, "Nothing personal, just accountability." Alex said, "You edited me into a villain." She replied with a clap emoji, then vanished into adoration. Mark said, "She's trending. Any response will feed her." Priya said, "Cowardice in a suit still smells like cowardice." Alex said, "I won't let her script my death." He stepped toward the front, rain louder now, heart a nail gun. A car slowed outside like a judge arriving late. Alex said, "I'll post the raw video and the batch logs." Priya said, "Then you speak soft, not bitter." The neon flickered, syllables breaking like cheap glass. Alex said, "If I fall telling the truth." Somewhere a kettle clicked off, punctuating the decision. He hit upload and felt the floor tilt. Alex said, "Here is the uncut truth." The progress bar crawled like a wounded thing. Priya said, "Whatever happens, you are not a rumor to me." A fresh wave of mockery smashed into the post before it finished. Alex said, "They booed the trailer before the film." Mark said, "Metrics say this won't land." The oven hissed as if whispering a secret mercy. Alex said, "If I'm doomed, I'll be doomed in daylight." The first honest comments arrived like shy birds, then were chased by hawks. Priya said, "Hold the line, Alex." He nodded, swallowing the rust of fear. Outside, a neighbor pulled their child away from the door. Alex said, "Tonight ends something I spent 10 years building." The bar completed, and the room felt caught between prayer and crash. Morning crept in like an apology no one believed, and the bakery smelled of coffee trying to fix a funeral. Alex said, "Before this, I knew every face by order and laugh." Priya said, "Tell me the first day you opened." He smiled at the old dent in the counter and winced. Alex said, "We painted the sign ourselves and thought the city would taste it." Mark said, "Back then, I saw margins, not miracles." Priya said, "You kept a notebook of names and birthdays." Alex said, "I baked a cake for a kid whose dad forgot payday." The mixer hummed as memory replaced panic. Alex said, "I wanted sweetness to be ordinary courage." Priya said, "That's the person worth defending." Outside, the rain paused like a breath between sobs. Alex said, "I built a place where people rested their armor." The neon steadied, as if the story remembered its softer voice. Before the storm, Saturday lines curled to the door like ribbon on a gift, and Alex said, "We ran out of crullers by 10. Priya said, "You told jokes to the kids and comped the tired." A photo on the wall showed a winter market with mittened smiles. Alex said, "I believed kindness could scale like a recipe." Mark said, "Revenue doubled in Q3, joy made good math." A regular brought her dog, and the leash hung from a nail like a charm. Alex said, "They trusted us with birthdays and quiet griefs." Priya said, "You kept allergy cards like prayer slips." The espresso machine chattered a language of welcome. Alex said, "I hired high schoolers and taught timing like music." Priya said, "You were a steward, not a brand." The past glowed warm, a lantern against the cold headline night. Dinner at Alex's tiny apartment had once been loud, with friends clipping stories to the air like paper birds. Alex said, "We fought over songs and stole each other's fries." On the table sat a chipped blue plate from his mother. Priya said, "You kept that plate to remember starting small." He turned it over and traced the hairline crack. Alex said, "Home is a seam I keep stitching." The kettle sang, and the steam made hollows on the window. Priya said, "You are not your mentions." He laughed without joy and nodded anyway. Alex said, "I was a person before I was a headline." Outside, sirens stretched and softened into city hush. Priya said, "We will rebuild slower and truer." He set 2 mugs down like treaties and breathed in the ordinary mercy. Ambition had been a ladder built from early mornings, and Alex said, "I took wholesales to keep lights on." Priya said, "You trained hands until they heard dough breathe." Mark said, "We planned a second location near the hospital." Alex unfolded a grease-spotted sketch of a bigger kitchen. Alex said, "I wanted a scholarship for kids who can't afford culinary school." Priya said, "You wrote the draft and hid it in the ledger." He nodded, throat tight, as if remembering a kindness ode. Alex said, "Success was never a crown, it was a table with more chairs." The old mixer coughed and then settled into a steady rhythm. Priya said, "Dreams stand even when the crowd kicks the walls." Alex said, "Then we brace the studs and keep baking." The room felt larger than the noise outside. By midnight the city yawned, and the bakery settled into a heartbeat of compressors and sleep. Alex said, "Before all this, I trusted slow time." Priya said, "Slow time still holds you when fast hate burns out." He wiped the counter in circles like erasing old chalk. Alex said, "I don't want to become only what they accuse." Priya said, "We keep the core, we let the fear molt." The neon washed them in tender pink like a shy apology. Alex said, "Tomorrow, I bake for whoever still walks in." Priya said, "That is your rebellion and your refuge." The rain finally quit and left the street polished. Alex said, "If hope is bread, I will feed it daily." Priya said, "Then morning will remember your name." The silence answered with a small, faithful hum. At 9 a.m., The sponsor emails lined up like pallbearers, and each subject line carried a shovel. Mark said, "They're invoking morality clauses." Alex said, "I baked their launch cakes last spring." Priya said, "They forget fast when fear pays better." A courier arrived to collect a branded neon, and the wall looked naked. Alex said, "They want me gone before lunch." Mark said, "I advise them to pause, not sever." The word sever felt surgical and cold in the air. Priya said, "We will survive with fewer logos and more neighbors." Another email pinged, then another, like hail on tin. Alex said, "My invoices will read as eulogies." Mark said, "Cash flow is a cliff. Step carefully." The espresso machine hissed an exhausted warning, and the counter became a triage table. The group chat that once pulsed with memes turned sterile, and replies arrived like apologies to a stranger. Alex said, "They're reading me as contamination." Priya said, "Cowardice dresses as caution when storms trend." A former collaborator posted a vague prayer that cut like a blade. Alex said, "He used my recipe, now he uses my ruin." Mark said, "People are hedging brand risk, not friendship." The front door opened and closed with no footsteps in between. Alex said, "Silence is the new testimonial." Priya said, "I'll keep talking even if I talk alone." The radio DJ chuckled through a scandal roundup. Alex said, "I can hear them repackaging me for ad breaks." A plate rattled on the shelf, and the kitchen held its breath. Family arrived like weather, uninvited and impossible to ignore. And Mara stood with keys clenched. Mara said, "Mom can't handle the calls at church." Alex said, "Tell her not to read them." She pressed her lips, and love looked like retreat. Priya said, "We can route messages away from her." Mara said, "She asks why you want to apologize." Alex said, "For what? For not being their rumor." The answer dropped between them like a plate that did not shatter. Mara said, "I have kids, I can't be tagged in this." Priya said, "He is not a plague to quarantine." Alex said, "I won't force you to choose me." The room dimmed as a cloud crossed, and the oven ticked a lonely metronome. By evening, screenshots of a decade-old post surfaced like bones at low tide, and the captions roared. Alex said, "That joke was ignorant. I was ignorant." Priya said, "Say it plain, and repair with action." Mark said, "Context won't save you, but contrition may dull the blade." He typed with fingers that felt heavier than steel. Alex said, "I'm sorry to those I hurt, and I will learn aloud." The statement breathed like a newborn in a hurricane. Priya said, "We link resources and plan training for staff." Alex said, "I'll pay for workshops and shut up long enough to listen." Mark said, "Post now and pin it." He pressed send and watched the fury stir, then shift by a millimeter. The night gathered itself like a jury recess. Morning headlines crowned a replacement, and a glossy feature praised a pop-up that took his slot. Alex said, "They moved in before my coffee cooled." Priya said, "Speed is the scavenger's superpower." Mark said, "City events reassigned the vendor booth." Alex said, 10 years traded for a press kit and a ring light." The rival posted a slow-motion pour of ganache over a borrowed idea. Priya said, "Your recipe wore their hashtag without credit." Mark said, "Document and date. We may need counsel." Alex said, "Let them have the lights. I'll keep the heat." The ovens came alive, stubborn as drum beats. Priya said, "We bake for witnesses, not for weather." He nodded, and the dough rose like a small defiance. The betrayal slithered in through a screenshot, and Alex said, "This came from Jenna's account." Priya said, "She doctored your words into poison." The timestamp matched the night he trusted her to film behind the counter. Alex said, "She cut the laugh, left the silence, made me cruel." Mark said, "It explains the speed of the wildfire." Priya said, "She craved the clicks more than your friendship." Alex pressed his palms against the cool steel, breath shuddering. Alex said, "I fed her, trusted her, gave her my keys." Priya said, "This was never about cake. It was about Spotlight. Mark said. And she wears it now, unashamed. The kitchen lights hummed like they knew betrayal had texture. Alex said. She served my heart on a platter I built. Alex replayed the raw clip and watched Janice edit side by side. Alex said she cut seconds into daggers. Priya said, see how she splices your paws into arrogance? The betrayal burned brighter than the mob's chants. Alex said, she wanted me ruined, not corrected. Mark said, she leveraged your trust as a ladder. Priya said, this wasn't a mob accident. It was engineered. Alex felt his chest cave, but his spine hardened. Alex said, I will not die by her script. Priya said, then write your own before it's too late. The hum of the cooler filled the silence between vows. Alex said, if I fall, it will be in my own voice, not hers. Priya found an email thread buried in archives, and she said, Jenna pitched her own pop-up before the storm. Alex said, she staged my fall to clear her stage. The proof made the air thinner than smoke. Mark said, it was sabotage disguised as justice. Alex said, she whispered loyalty while drafting invoices for my sponsors. Priya said, she struck from your blind side. Alex leaned back, laughter sharp as glass. Alex said, the mob was her chorus, and I was her offering. Mark said, expose her, and the storm shifts. Priya said, but expose her clean without venom. Alex said, I will give them truth uncut, no seasoning. The oven ticked in eerie applause. Alex said, if I reveal her hand, they may call it deflection. Priya said, if you stay silent, they crown her innocent. Mark said, the mob feasts on proof, not feelings. Alex scrolled through timestamps, trembling but steady. Alex said, she framed me with scissors and lies. Priya said, truth is your only salvage. He drafted a thread, fingers hesitant like a surgeon. Alex said, here's her pitch, here's the cut, here's the betrayal. Priya said clarity, not vengeance. Mark said publish, and let her squirm under her own receipts. The night deepened, as though listening for justice. Alex said, if fire took me, fire can reveal her too. The truth dropped online at 2 a.m., and silence held for a beat too long. Alex said, they don't know what to do with evidence. Priya said, they will twist, but some will see. Mark refreshed the feed, pulse quick. Headlines cracked as whispers spread. Jenna's edit exposed, her pitch revealed. Alex said, she sharpened knives with borrowed steel. Priya said now she holds them barehanded. The mob shifted like a tide, confused by new moons. Alex said, I didn't win, but she can't claim sainthood now. Priya said, we anchor to this truth whatever the storm decides. The bakery lights hummed into dawn, carrying both ruin and defiance. The city fair opened like a courtroom, and Alex walked in carrying truth like a fragile platter. Priya said, we stand by facts and by each other. Mark said, keep your voice even, and your receipts ready. Jenna's pop-up glowed, all ring lights and lacquered smiles. Alex said, you cut me to climb. Jenna said, you cut yourself with arrogance. The crowd leaned in, phones lifted like spears in soft daylight. Priya said, here are her emails and the edit timeline. Jenna laughed, but her eyes blinked too fast. Alex said, you filmed my pause and called it contempt. Mark said, let the record breathe. A chant rose, sharp and hungry, tasting conflict like sugar. Alex said, I am here to speak, not to trend. The air trembled with neon and accusation, and the fair felt briefly colder. The moderator wavered, then handed Alex the mic, and its weight felt like wet iron. Alex said, I failed before, and I learned. The crowd murmured, hunting weakness and grace. Alex said, ignorant words hurt, and I own that harm. Priya said, he funds training and listens without defense. A heckler shouted, and laughter cracked down the line like lightning. Alex said, I won't bargain with your hate, only with our shared dignity. His breath broke, a small fracture heard in stereo. Jenna said, so many words for a guilty man. Mark said, facts first, performance never. Alex said, I am tired of being your headline. His eyes brimmed and steadied, like glass cooling in a kiln. The crowd's noise dipped, then hovered, like gulls deciding whether to strike. Jenna stepped forward like a spotlight in human form, and the ring lights obeyed her orbit. Jenna said accountability hurts kings who thought themselves adored. Alex said, you forged the crown and painted blood on it. Priya said, show the uncut file to the crowd. Jenna grinned and raised her phone, then stalled on the screen. Mark said, play it from source, not your clip app. The projector took the feed, and silence sharpened like knives. Alex's soft laugh appeared. The empathy, the context, the missing bridge. Jenna said, he rehearsed this version after the storm. Alex said, this was time-stamped long before your edit. Priya said, and her sponsorship pitch predates the hashtag. The crowd rippled with the sound of doubt, changing clothes. Jenna's jaw set hard, and the air smelled faintly of panic. The hecklers surged, and then split as Priya stepped into their noise with a steady pulse. Priya said, you can boo a man, but you can't erase a decade of kindness. A woman in the crowd nodded, clutching a pastry bag like a memory. Priya said, he catered memorials and forgot to bill grieving families. Mark said, we have the receipts for generosity too. Alex said, I did those things because they were right, not as currency. Priya said, justice without compassion is just theater. The chant faltered, sharpened, then softened by inches. Jenna said, this is a pity pageant. Priya said, this is a plea for proportion. The wind tugged the banner above them, and the letters trembled like a conscience waking. The climax arrived without music, only breath and street hum. Jenna said, your bakery is a relic, and I own the future. Alex said, if the future is built on lies, it collapses under its own lights. Priya said, we brought truth, and truth can stand in daylight. Mark said, we will pursue remedies, but we refuse a witch hunt. A phone in the front row streamed live, numbers ticking like rain. Alex said, to those I hurt, I keep learning and making repair. He turned to Jenna, not angry, just finished. Alex said, you can have the spotlight. I need the oven's heat. The crowd divided, some cheering, some jeering, most thinking. Jenna's smile cracked, faint as a hairline in glass. The fair resumed its music, but the air kept their echo. Morning arrived without applause, and the bakery wore yesterday's ash like a shawl. Alex said, if they never come back, I will still open the door. Priya said, rituals save people who have been renamed by storms. He lifted the grate, and it screamed like a tired violin. Alex said, today is not victory, it is practice. The espresso machine thumped a slow heartbeat, and then steadied. Priya said, we priced the menu lower in post-clear hours. He wrote on the chalkboard with hands that had learned humility. Alex said, one loaf at a time, and we breathe between burns. A passerby glanced in and pretended to check the sky. Priya said, we will not beg, we will welcome. He arranged croissants as if laying bricks for a small bridge. Alex said, I can live with quiet if it is honest. The neon flickered once, then found a gentler tone. The room held a promise the internet could not measure. At 10, the first customer in weeks shuffled in, carrying hesitation like a heavy coat. Alex said, good morning. What feels safe to try today? The man pointed to a cinnamon knot as if choosing a truce. Priya said, on the house if you hate it, and still on the house if you love it. He smiled with the crack of ice breaking in spring. Alex said, we baked slower today so the sugar could listen. The man nodded, then placed cash in the jar without looking up. Priya said, thank you for being here while it's hard. He took a bite and closed his eyes like a tired harbor. Alex said, does it carry warmth all the way through? The man said, it tastes like effort, not apology. Priya met Alex's eyes with a private victory. The door chimed again, small as a sparrow but louder than hate. Mara entered at noon, not as a judge but as a weather report clearing. Mara said, "The kids asked why Uncle Alec's sign is sad." Alex said, "Because it's been shouting for too long." She set a container of homemade soup on the counter, like an apology. Priya said, "Stay for lunch. We'll trade soup for rolls." Mara said, "Mom watched your statement and cried quieter." Alex said, "Tell her I will visit without cameras and bring bread." Mara's mouth trembled, then steadied into sister again. Priya said, "Families heal in present tense." Mara said, "I can't defend you to everyone, but I can stand here." Alex said, "Stand and eat, and that will be enough today." The clock ticked in softer syllables. Outside, the clouds tore open a patient sliver of noon. Mark returned with contracts that looked thinner than last month, and thicker than despair. Mark said, "2 local markets will host you on trial terms." Alex said, "Trial is more generous than exile." Priya said, "We will print new labels with ingredients and context." Mark said, "Transparency is brand and shield." Alex said, "I will publish pay scales and training plans." Priya said, "And we will keep receipts of repair, not for clout but for proof." Mark said, "The lawyer suggests a letter to sponsors with measured teeth." Alex said, "No threats, only facts and a door left open." The printer hummed like a cautious hope. Priya said, "We tell the story, but we do not beg the chorus." The day's light thinned, and the pages cooled like fresh tiles. Night fell kind, and the bakery sounded like a tide finally turning. Alex said, "We lost much, but not everything." Priya said, "We kept our hands and our reasons." He boxed a loaf labeled community batch and placed it by the door. Alex said, "Free for anyone who needs to forget a headline." Priya said, "Repair is daily, never viral." He laughed, a small sound that did not ask permission. Alex said, "Tomorrow we bake the scholarship loaf and announce the fund." Priya said, "Let the first grant be for listening." The street lights painted the window with soft halos. Alex said, "If they still hate me, I will keep feeding those who don't." Priya said, "And some who do, because hunger is bigger than opinion." The mixer clicked off, and the silence felt earned. The morning after the fair felt like a theater after the crowd, and confetti of opinions stuck to the floor. Alex said, "Silence weighs more than shouts." Priya said, "It's the hour when consequence counts votes." A news van idled, and then drifted on. Alex said, "They need fresher prey." The inbox glowed with half apologies shaped like PRE. Priya said, "They are hedging against tomorrow's outrage." Alex said, "I won't trade bread for brand back." The oven's warm breath softened the room's edges. Priya said, "Breathe where the metrics cannot enter." Alex said, "I will keep the door open for anyone who still knocks." A child pressed a nose to the glass and waved. Priya said, "There is the measure that matters." Alex said, "If I'm remembered, let it be for heat shared, not heat survived." The day stood ready to judge nothing and feed someone. The bell chimed, and a man entered, holding a hard drive like a relic. Noah said, "I kept quiet too long." Alex said, "Do I know you?" Noah said no. "But I edited Jenna's first clip." The name landed like a gavel. Priya said, "Why come now?" Noah said, "I thought the mob had it right until I read your raw files." He placed printouts of EXIF stamps and draft histories on the counter. "Noah said the 1-star photo belongs to a different shop across town." Alex said, "You watched them bend the frame until it broke." Noah said, "I helped, then quit, then hid." Priya said, "Truth late is still truth." Noah said, "I'll testify wherever this needs air." The bakery seemed to expand around the word testify. Alex said, "Then let's let it breathe." By evening the thread traveled faster than malice, and comments shifted like a tide ashamed of its own strength. And Alex said, "Are they listening or just switching teams?" Priya said, "Some are learning, some are fleeing blame." Noah said, "I'll sign a statement and attach the files." The first outlet updated the headline with a careful cough. Alex said, corrections never go as viral as lies. Priya said, they do not need to, they need to last. Noah said, I'll speak on record and off record. A former sponsor asked for a meeting that smelled like salvage. Alex said, I'll meet them but I won't kneel. Priya said, we negotiate with dignity or not at all. The sun slid behind tenements and left an honest blue. Alex said, if the chorus softens, we still sing our own key. Night gathered its courage, and Alex locked the door not as retreat but as a vow. Alex said, tomorrow, I reduce hours and add the community table. Priya said, 4 nights a week, free bakes for the food bank. Noah said, I'll help scrub your name in the places I stained it. Alex said, scrub the record, not the scar. He taped a new sign that spoke softly about wages, training, and the scholarship fund. Priya said, repair visible enough to copy. Alex said, let those who wanted a spectacle watch service instead. The mixer hummed like a choir warming up. Noah said, I can teach a free media literacy class here. Alex smiled like a man who found a small harbor. Priya said, we build a future that doesn't need permission. The city held its breath and then exhaled, and Alex stood beneath the sign he painted once with foolish hope and now with earned faith. Alex said, I was not saved by the crowd, I was steadied by a few. Priya said, crowds burn bright, neighbors build slow. Noah said, I'll carry the blame I earned, not the story I wrote for clicks. Alex said, I forgive the chorus and remember the dishwashers who stayed. The door opened for a nurse on night shift, and Mercy smelled like cinnamon. Priya said, we will be measured by hands served, not hands clapped. Alex said, let the future judge the bread. The streetlight drew a soft halo around the word open. He breathed, and let the word become fact. Alex said, I am not trending. I am working. The final truth fit in both palms and tasted warm.